My name is Reverend Dr. William Glover, and I am so glad you are joining us for today. No matter what it may look like, we believe and know that God is in control. He's an ever-present help in the time of need. And with the help of modern technology, we can gather virtually to praise, to worship, and to minister the Word of God. If this is your first time tuning in, we'd like to give you a very special thank you. You could have picked any church's live stream, but you chose ours, and we want to say thank you. It is our mission to have a redeeming influence in our community, to cultivate a culture of excellence, and to expand the kingdom of God. We are pleased to bring that mission to you today. Make sure to like and follow us on social media, on our Facebook page and on YouTube. And please share this with your family and friends. And once again, I'd like to thank you for joining us for our online worship experience. Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. William Glover, and once again, I'd like to welcome you to the campus of Mount Hermon Ministries for this evening's virtual clergy symposium dealing with the topic of the coronavirus, vaccination, who, why, when, and where. If you've been following this symposium series, you'll realize that the very first symposium dealt with the coronavirus at the very beginning of the outbreak of this pandemic. And we held that symposium to provide education on what you can do to help keep your family safe and your community safe. And here we are on the back end of the pandemic, where in the beginning, the only thing we could do to keep ourselves safe was to shelter in place, to social distance, to wear a mask, and to sanitize. And we want to encourage everyone to continue to do those things. But now we're a couple months into having a vaccination, and we're having to do another symposium to educate on the vaccination, in terms of whether it is safe or not. We've got a wonderful panel here tonight who are going to answer questions, and questions we don't answer, you'll get to ask. So with that, I want to thank you for joining us. Contact your family and your friends. Have them join us on Facebook streaming and also on YouTube, Mount Hermon Ministries. At this time, I'd like to introduce and yield to our moderator for this evening, none other than Mr. Lee Pitts of Lee Pitts Live Fox 4.
Okay, thanks a great deal, Pastor Glover, for trusting in me again to be a part of what I consider probably the most important symposium we've had so far, and I say that about all of them, but they continue to get better. Here at Mount Hermon Ministries, it does an outstanding job, and I'm looking forward to moderating this process. We're going to go back before we get to the introduction of the panel. We're going to get a prayer from Reverend Phillips.
Let us pray. Great God, we thank you so much for the opportunity to be here this evening, and to those who are watching online. We know that without your presence, all of our efforts are vain, and that's why we invite you to take your place during this conversation. Give us wisdom, give us insight, help us to leave here with insight on how to better serve our community, how to take care of ourselves. So we commit this entire time to you, and we ask this now in the name of Jesus, who reigns forever. Amen.
Amen. A virtual clergy symposium, the topic, the coronavirus, the vaccine, who, why, when, and where. We hope that when we leave here this evening, we'll have addressed these particular questions, concerns, and we hope that you will call in, go to, if you join us on social media, send your questions in, and we will certainly get those asked to our panelists. You can catch this streaming on the Mount Hermon Ministries Facebook page. Some of you are looking at us on YouTube, and I think they can also see us on the website as well, Mount Hermon Ministries website.
They can get there from the website.
Okay, so all around the world, you're joining us now. Start getting your questions answered, asked, ready. Those questions online, you can type them in. They'll get over to me, and we'll get them out to the pastors and to all the other experts in the last 30 minutes of the symposium. So let's get right to it and meet our esteemed panel. We'll get your name and your organization. Let's start right here and just work our way this way.
All right, my name is Dr. Tiffany Smith-Sutton. I work at Lee Memorial. I am currently completing my residency training in family medicine at FSU's Family Medicine Residency Program over at Lee Memorial.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Roth. I'm the Assistant Director at the Health Department here in Lee County, and my background is also infectious diseases. That's what I studied in school, and that's what I've been doing at the Health Department since I started.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Phil Phillips. I have the privilege of serving as the lead pastor of Agape Christian Fellowship here in Fort Myers, Florida.
I've already introduced myself, so let's keep it moving.
My name is Diane Spears. I'm a nursing director at Lee Memorial Hospital. One of the units I work on is the medical infectious disease unit. I'm also the parish nurse here at Mount Hermon. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Reverend Dr. Ricky Anderson, founding pastor of Followers of Christ Fellowship Ministries.
Okay, so you've met our esteemed panel. Of course, I'm Lee Pitts, the host of Lee Pitts Live on Fox 4. And now we'll go straight to Reverend Dr. William Glover for our our opening address. I won't put it 5 minutes on it, Pastor. I apologize for that.
I don't think it'll be 5.
I saw it written here. Take as long as you want, my friend.
So why are we here this evening? Of the roughly 998,000 doses of coronavirus vaccinations that have occurred in the state of Florida, only roughly 75,000 or 7.5% have been administered to people of color. Of the 20,000 or so doses administered in Lee County, only about 1,400 or 7% of the doses have found their ways into the arms of black and brown people. Due to work in mainly essential worker jobs, people of color have been contracting the coronavirus disease at a greater rate. And due to comorbidities, such as underlying health conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, black and brown people have been hospitalized and even have been dying at a higher rate. And yet, in spite of the impact of COVID-19 on communities of color, these communities have been being vaccinated at a rate that lags alarmingly behind our white counterparts. The question must be asked and answered: why are so few black and brown people being vaccinated? There are multiple reasons, and they overlap. One reason is apparent, clear, systemic problems with the rollout of the vaccination, such as difficulty with getting registered or even having access to computers to register. Issues such as site locations not being near where people who need it can access, or transportation to get to site locations, or long lines when they get to site locations, or even when attempts have been made to provide vaccination sites in communities of colors. People who don't live in the community have come and far outnumbered those who do and instead receive those vaccinations. Some issues also stem from the fact that there is historical fear rooted in mistrust of the medical community. Some from personal past experiences with perceived racism in medical treatment. Some for people having knowledge of historical medical experimentation on people of color, such as the Tuskegee syphilis experiments, And then a small percentage of people who just have a fear of vaccinations, because in any vaccination, there's a small percentage of people who have adverse reaction to it. But the thing that concerns me the most, the greatest contributing factor that concerns me the most, are those that fall in the category of myths, misinformation, and conspiracy theories, such as the virus or the pandemic being a sign of the end times, or receiving a vaccine is somehow the mark of the beast, or a chip is secretly being planted in our arms, or that it's being used for population control. All of these things are surfacing. People have access to this information, and it is influencing their behavioral health. All these factors in terms of why black and brown people are not getting vaccinated are real to the people who are choosing not to be vaccinated. But the purpose of the night is to treat your concerns seriously, to make every effort to answer your questions thoroughly, to address the systemic issues where we can, to ease fears and mistrust where we can, and to dispel the myths and the misinformation with truth and facts. Of all the reasons, as I said earlier, that concern me the most, it is the myths and the misconduct. Here's what a myth is. A myth is a widely held but false belief. It's important for us to understand that just because a belief is widely held does not make it a fact or truth. We must let go of our myths regarding the coronavirus and vaccination, and we must embrace the truth. We must embrace the facts. We must embrace the science. We must let go of these myths like we have let go of other myths as we have learned and grown. For example, people once believed that the world was flat. They believed that if you sailed past the horizon, you would fall off the face of the earth. But they let that myth go, and now we're sailing around the world. It was once believed that lightning does not strike twice in the same place. Well, we now know with buildings like the Empire State Building, which gets hit by lightning hundreds of times a year, that is a myth, that lightning can strike twice in the same place. It was once believed that bats were blind, and though they have poor eyesight and use echolocation to navigate how they get around, we now know that bats can see. What am I saying? That as we learn, as we grow, part of that process is letting our myths and misconceptions go. And it's time for us to do that in regard to the coronavirus and the vaccination. Consider these statistics, and then we'll get to answering questions. Thus far, approximately 104 million people around the world have taken the vaccination. 30 million plus have taken the vaccination in the United States. 1 million plus have taken the vaccination in the state of Florida. And right here in Lee County, 20+ thousand have already received the vaccination. For those of you who are waiting to see what the side effects are going to be, we have a pretty good sample pool worldwide now to know what the side effects are from this virus. And just like we learned to trust the measles virus or the measles vaccination or the mumps vaccination, in time we'll learn to trust this vaccination as well. I'm hopeful that we're helpful in helping you to make an informed decision to keep yourself, your family, and your community safe and line up to get this vaccination. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Pastor Glover has done a yeoman's job, an outstanding job of laying out a great framework for this discussion this evening, and we're going to get right to it. But before we do, I want everybody to know that another myth is that black people could not swim. Okay, and of course people know me for my swimming background, but I've been going around spreading the gospel on that, and black people swimming. Speaking of black people swimming, one of my favorite students in my swimming class came from the Anderson family, so I'm gonna go right to Reverend Dr. Ricky Anderson. Your son and your daughter came through our swimming program. They're swimming just fine, right? And they black. Okay. So I just want to have just add something a little softer to that, Pastor. I know you know where I'm going with this. But let me go with you. We got some great questions here. I want everybody to know we're going to be talking about research, safety, trust information, practical things from the church perspective. Let's stay right here with you, Reverend Dr. Ricky Anderson, as we start to get everybody involved in the process. After listening to what Pastor Glover said, he took a position that there are myths out there and we need to get past those myths. As a leader in the church, how do you go about advising members of the church? Do you just give a broad answer, or you say it's up to them, or are you encouraging them to get vaccinated if they get the opportunity?
I tell them to trust the science.
Okay.
That's where we are. Trust it, and what we've seen thus far, it has proven to be helpful. And I leave it to them like this: when it's available for me, I'm certainly going to take it.
And when it's available for me, I'm going to take it. So I'll put that out there as well before we get too far down the road. Now, you told me that right now you have 34 people in your congregation that had the virus. People need to know that this is real. Expound on that in this symposium.
Yes, sir. 34. We had one to pass away.
Mm-hmm.
From teenagers up to one of the members in their 80s,
Mm-hmm.
and several families. I mean, the entire family. So it's been a spreader.
It's real, people. Let's go right to you, Diane Spears, who we see in the community all the time. Let's talk about the side effects, and then we're going to bounce around from on that, Pastor Glover. Let's talk about the side effects as a trained medical person. There are reports of side effects. Will you get side effects? What are some of the common side effects? And why should the vaccine and the risks of what are some of the risks of the vaccine?
Okay, there are, like with many drugs, there's a possibility of side effects, but the side effects outweighs having coronavirus. Some of the side effects from having the vaccine, most of the people, because I've dealt with them, the headache, fatigue. Once in a while, someone said they've been nauseated. So those are mostly what I hear. I'm tired. I have a headache. I feel nauseated. But that doesn't last very long. It may last about 12 hours. May I tell you about, I took the coronavirus vaccine. I've had both, and I want you to know the only thing that I felt was fatigue, and I rest that Saturday, that Sunday, I got up, I felt better. One of the side effects, it could be anaphylactic shock, but that's rare. I haven't heard of anyone really getting that. And if you start having some difficulty breathing, swelling, and you can help me, doctor, those are the times that you want to call 911 and get in. But I working in the healthcare system, working with most of us who've had the vaccine, none of those things have been reported.
I'm glad you, to work everybody in, I'm glad you mentioned the good doctor over there, Dr. Smith. Sutton, she used that big word. So I think she said anaphylactic shock. Okay, can you Sesame Street that for us?
So basically, anaphylaxis is basically an immune response, and so it's kind of an allergic reaction. And if you're highly allergic to something, in this case the vaccine, or some of the ingredients that make up the vaccine, then you will in fact maybe have an immune response that can lead to anaphylaxis, which presents itself as throat closure, difficulty breathing, and things like that. In order to kind of evaluate for the risk of that, everyone getting the vaccine is evaluated for about 15 minutes after getting their dose of the vaccine. And it's important to think about your history of vaccinations. And if you have a history of having an adverse reaction to vaccines, then you want to take those things into account. because you may be at an increased risk of having an adverse reaction to this particular vaccine. And I think it's also important just to kind of weigh your risk and benefits and to discuss that with your healthcare provider to determine whether or not you should, in fact, get the vaccine.
I want to get a big picture on this to establish this symposium, which is going very well. Reverend Dr. Glover, you laid out some clear things in your presentation. I want to get specific to the clergy who are up there here first and how you're going about, Reverend Anderson has already done his, how he's going about talking to his congregation and people. I got a general idea for your philosophy. We'll come back to you second on this. But let's go to Dr. Phillips and how you're going about. Me and you had a debriefing recently that I found very interesting on how you're going about talking to your congregation and people who will listen to you as a leader and how they approach the vaccine.
Well, our approach is education and allowing people to make decisions based on the facts and based on the science. And so I personally don't advocate from the pulpit that you should go take the vaccine, but if people hear when I speak, they'll know that I'm in favor of health, and whatever you have to do to be healthy, that's what you need to do based on your research. Because I think as leaders, our words carry weight, and we want to also be careful with the liability aspect of people saying, well, the church told me to do this, as opposed to saying, we're making it available for you, letting you know it's available, here's the facts, and then you make your decision.
Okay. How you, from the, as talking to people, we heard your presentation, but how are you approaching it as well?
Well, I'm probably a little more direct
Right. Okay. That's fine.
than Dr. Phil in his approach with actively encouraging people. Because I think in educating and in following the science, to me there is a logical conclusion. Factoring in some of the considerations that have already been mentioned in terms of your own personal health, being informed, and all things being equal, if you have no history of reacting adversely to the coronavirus and your current, to vaccinations, and your current health is such that it doesn't put you at a greater risk, then I encourage people to do it. Because as we have been discussing since the very beginning of this, historically, there have always ever only been two ways to deal with pandemics of this sort. One is what we had to do rather unsuccessfully the first 9 months of this, shelter in place, social distance, wear masks. That process got so politicized that it was rendered ineffective. And then, of course, now we're at the point where we have a number of viruses that can be effective in helping people build immunity to it. So given that's where we are, I have a strong conviction to where I encourage people that the responsible thing to do.
Okay.
All the other factors considered, informed factors considered, to take the virus. And I am on record as soon as I am eligible and in the demographic that can receive it, I will be receiving it.
Okay. Let's go to you, Jennifer, get you into the discussion representing the Florida Department of Health. And you've been very outspoken and out there getting the message out, going to a specific question. After I get the COVID-19 vaccine, will I test positive for COVID-19 on a viral test?
That is a good question. We get that a lot. So the basic answer is no. Those swabs that you get up your nose and down your throat, that picks up very specific parts of the virus. And the vaccine isn't a whole virus. It's just little pieces of protein that come out of it. So it doesn't actually create any virus in your body. So there is no way you could test positive on those tests after you get the vaccine.
Okay, if I had COVID-19 and recover, do I still need to get vaccinated, and why?
Yes. Yes, you do. So we absolutely want people to still get vaccinated. We know that the immunity from the natural infection doesn't last forever. We typically say people get about 3 months of natural immunity after an infection. So we really want people to go ahead and get that vaccine because the vaccine will last you longer. It'll boost your immunity. So absolutely, as soon as you're recovered from COVID, we would still encourage you to get that vaccine. I don't know if any of the doctor wants to weigh in, but I absolutely would think that.
Okay, so I'm glad you said that because I was going to say that when we get into medical part, if the doctor, Diane or Dr. Sutton, if you guys ever want to just come in and add anything or take away or what have we, y'all feel free to just jump in. Everybody agree, or you want to add anything to what Jennifer just said on that?
Well, I definitely agree with what Jennifer has said, and I kind of just want to add on to the first question of whether or not you'll test positive for the coronavirus, and I agree that you will not. But what you may test positive for is antibody testing, and that's the kind of goal of the vaccine itself, is for your body and for your immune system to be able to produce those antibodies that will be able to fight against the virus if you are in fact exposed. And so doing the antibody test, and if you test positive for that, that means that the vaccine did in fact do its job, and that you do have we were able to produce antibodies, and you are having circulating antibodies that will protect you against the virus if you are in fact exposed to it. So no, you will not test positive for the coronavirus test, but you may test positive for antibodies, and that's a sign that the vaccine did what it was supposed to do.
Okay, I'm gonna stay with you for a second on that. Now, when you get the test, you also do a second test on that test to see about antibodies? Is that what you're saying?
So
or is that another test you take for antibodies?
That would be another test, and right now there's no protocol as to testing for antibodies, but that is something that's out there. And so people may be curious to know, is there an antibody test? And if so, how do I know, would I get it? And right now there's no protocol for testing for antibodies, but if you have been vaccinated against the coronavirus, then you should in fact test positive for antibodies, and that would be proof that the vaccine was able to do its job.
Diane, what about the myth, not myth, I don't know if it's a myth, people say that if you've had the COVID-19 and sort of recovered from COVID-19, now you can't get COVID-19 again.
No, that's not true. I mean, it may be rare, but there's a possibility that you can be reinfected. And this is why we encourage the people to, if you had COVID-19, to take the vaccination, because there's a possibility that you can be reinfected. And again, you don't know the severity of it. So that's the myth. You can be reinfected.
Dr. Glover, religious beliefs, behavior habits, how can religious belief and education around and behavioral habits be included in the education process for the vaccination?
Okay. I think it's all interrelated, and I think the benefit of a platform like this is that we have health professionals with behavioral health professionals, with spiritual health professionals collaborating to educate, and also aligning the science with faith. Faith allows us to take God at His word in terms of the natural world and how it was created. Science explains the workings of it and helps us understand the workings of it. There's a wonderful passage in the Old Testament, and this is a paraphrase, that I think speaks to the marriage of faith and medicine, and that they ought to work together when properly understood and not be adverse. And it speaks to the fact that God put healing in the leaves. And we know a lot of medical properties come from plants and other sources. But the faith aspect is man is able to discover those properties because God put them there. And for people who are struggling with the vaccination and how it came about, that the properties of that vaccination came from properties that either God created, put somewhere, or were created from things that God created. So this really, I'm hoping to bridge the gap and close the gap between faith and science, and this is a good example of it. They don't have to be at odds. They can work together, because Scripture teaches us to be healthy in our spirit, soul, and body. God isn't just totally preoccupied with your spirit or your soul. He wants a healthy body so that we can be agents of goodwill and be His representatives on this earth realm and do it as healthy and as long as we possibly could.
Okay, so with that being said, we have a world-class panel right here of various disciplines. We got the health profession, we got the health department, and we have the clergy here. It appears that here in Lee County, this question is broad. I'm kind of going to start over there with you, Jennifer, and Pastor Ricky Anderson right here. It appears that there's some synergy here now that we're seeing in other places being developed within the church community of being a great focal point to get the message out, to get the education out, and to get people vaccinated when the opportunity presents itself, get testing. Talk about the various partnerships and how it's playing out here in Lee County as we speak today.
Yeah, the one thing I say, the one big silver lining of the pandemic has been all of the partnerships that we've been able to create throughout this. The health department, before, we have not always been able to partner with every aspect of the community or be able to get to certain areas of the community like we wanted to. And this pandemic has really just opened doors and allowed us to meet people where they are. And, I think this is a perfect example of us. In the health department, we recognize that we do need to meet people where they are. And especially in the faith-based communities, we know that the clergy are going to be excellent educators. We know that congregations will listen to their reverends and pastors, and they go there every Sunday. They get that message every Sunday, and sometimes it's hard for us at the health department to always get our message out the way we want to, or to get it to the communities we want to get it to. So, we are working through these more unusual partnerships or, untested partnerships that we haven't used before, because we recognize this is the perfect way for us to be able to, synergize our message and educate the public quickly and effectively.
Mm-hmm. When you, Pastor Anderson, you just heard what Jennifer said about the health department. We have our medical experts here. What does this do? What is this whole coming together with the clergy, the church, health department, the medical professionals, as it relates to this pandemic that we're having now? How does that make you feel about how optimistic are you and those types of things?
Well, it kind of set the record straight, for one. I believe that everybody needs to stay in their own lane. I'm not a medical professional, so I don't talk like I'm a medical professional. I talk like a pastor, and they don't talk like pastors. They talk like medical professionals. And so when you put those two together, it really means a lot to hear what I'm hearing tonight. And basically, facts. They put those facts together and go for it.
Mm-hmm. So this is I've been on conference calls that's related to it. It seems almost like the ideal way to certainly reach a community that has not been so receptive to the process. I want to stay with the clergy on that. Dr. Field, Pastor Glover, I want y'all to speak to that particular question. This concept right here that we're seeing right here on this panel, is that sort of ideal starting point for reaching the unreached? Dr. Field?
I absolutely believe that God works through science because he's the one who created science. So I'm never one of those people who are extreme to the point where we ignore the provisions that God has made. So I think this collaboration represents the God of the Bible, because he says knowledge and understanding comes from him. So I'm a big proponent of marrying the two, but respecting the force that each has. And so I'm a big proponent of science and theology.
Ditto. I have nothing to add to that.
Okay, so let me
my position exactly. I would like to make a proposal, Lee, because I do think some of the questions as they are scripted, particularly in the research and safety, you're the moderator, but can I suggest that we just take those questions that are really factual based and allow our health professionals to address them, and I think they'll go towards answering many of the questions I'm seeing coming up on our live stream that people are asking.
Okay, so let's go right to you, back to you, Diane, on the practical, right? You took them out on the practical, right?
Research and safety.
Research, I'm going to switch over to.
Okay, let's go to
Yeah.
how has the vaccine able to be made so quickly, and how do we know it's safe?
And I'm going to answer this, and I'm going to ask either one to jump in afterwards. First of all, we have a pandemic going on. And so the focus for our scientists and our FDA is to deal with that, because we're losing too many lives. It is safe. The medication is safe because it did go and goes through that process, that rigorous process that the Food and Drug Administration take it through. So I think with all the death and everything going on, this is worldwide, it had to become a focus that we come up with something to make, to help. The medication, I want to say, what we're getting, the vaccine, is safe. I had to understand that too as a health professional. We're not getting the live virus. You're getting something, you're getting that mRNA, messenger RNA that's triggering, that's telling our body to make more protein that triggers our antibiotic to fight the virus. So when I've understood, I'm not getting a live virus, I'm getting something to help my body fight the virus.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's safe.
So going back to you, doctor, on that same point, is that generally when you have a virus, whether it be the flu or anything else, you're getting something to help your immune system to fight? This is the same concept?
Exactly, and so anytime you have a virus, whether it's the common cold or the flu, naturally it's treated as an invader to your immune system, and God has created an amazing thing in our body, and the immune system is an amazing thing, and it allows us to be able to mount an immune response and fight against foreign invaders. And so those are like the flu viruses and the cold viruses, and so naturally science has taken that knowledge that we know and has been able to create vaccines that we can introduce to our bodies and use our own body's machinery in order to create antibodies and create an immune response to fight off a virus if in fact we are exposed to it. And so we've taken the knowledge that we've learned about the body and how it works, and about the immune system and how it works with getting instruction and getting exposure to antigens, and our body recognizes that, and our little immune cells, they work to take that information and fight off. It talks to our body and tells our body to create antibodies so that we're able to fight off those foreign invaders. And so that is a big thing, and that's what we've used. We've used the science that we know and the information that we have available to us and the resources that we have available to us in order to kind of come up with vaccines in order to fight this thing.
How many?
And to make it what she said, and I'm sorry, did Pastor?
Well, actually, I want to reconcile something you said with a question, because you, in reference to safety, you mentioned that the FDA put this through rigorous tests. Yeah. But when we hear them talk about the vaccination, they don't talk about it in terms of being FDA approved. They talk about an emergency use authorization. Right. So if it went through the rigorous safety process, why isn't it FDA approved? And what does it mean, emergency use authorization? And is that less safe than FDA approved? I think so. Inquiring minds want to know.
I'm going to say this. I don't know quite know the answer, but I'm going to say this. Usually, when a new medication comes out, it's years before it hit the market. It's just years. It test after test after test. This is faster than normal, and perhaps that's why I'm just saying you're saying emergency uses.
So we are in a public health state of emergency, which in unprecedented times calls for unprecedented measures. And so we have to take those measures. And so what happened was we did have a prototype of an mRNA, because that's not normally how we give vaccines. This is a new type of vaccine, but we did have information in a prototype of a former mRNA vaccine that was created back in 2002 with the SARS virus, the SARS outbreak. And so they had already kind of been working
So there's precedence for this.
Right,
It's
so they have
no
already been
exceptions
kind of
made.
working
Okay.
on these types of vaccines. And so when this same type of virus, the same family of virus, the COVID or SARS-CoV-2, which is similar to the SARS outbreak that we had back then, is still a coronavirus, and so it's very similar. And so they used that information that they had and had already been working on to kind of develop a vaccine geared towards this particular virus. And so that's important to note that this isn't information that was just made from scratch, but it was already kind of been working on and already in the works. And so we were using new information to kind of synthesize a new vaccine that would be effective against this virus. And it's important to point out that what Diane said, it is an mRNA vaccine. So it is not the actual genetic material, not the actual virus itself. And so some of our old vaccines, or the vaccines that we use like to treat polio, say for example, they're live attenuated viruses. And so they're actually live viruses, and they try to attenuate it so that you don't have as much of a response to it. This is not an actual live virus, but it is in fact a genetic material that is used as a vector. And so the vaccine itself takes that genetic material, it introduces it to your body, it goes into the cell, but it never actually goes into the nucleus of the cell. So it never actually interacts with the cell DNA, but instead it uses the cell's machinery to create proteins, and specifically for the coronavirus, it's these spike proteins that are antigenic. Those are the proteins that cause us to be sick, the virulent proteins. And so it causes our cells to create these proteins so that our immune system sees these proteins on our cells and says, hey, they're not supposed to be here. We need to try to protect ourselves against it. Let's create antibodies to protect ourselves against it. So now we're creating antibodies. We're circulating antibodies. Our cells present these proteins, and it's a temporary thing. It's not like they'll stay there, but it allows our body to create the antibodies to fight against the virus. And so that's the ideal behind the mRNA virus, or the mRNA vaccine, and how it works to be effective.
And then to add on what she said, a lot of people, the question is this going to affect my DNA? And as she said, the DNA, the mRNA, it stimulates the cell, but it doesn't get into that cell where the DNA is in the nuclei of the cell. So it's not getting there. So it's not affecting the DNA at all.
Okay. So one of the questions that's constantly coming in is Jennifer, the wide variety of vaccines. I think I've heard at least 2 of them. Can you sort of unpack that and the difference in the different vaccines?
Yeah, so right now there's 2 vaccines in the United States that have what we call the emergency use authorization. And I would just add to that with an EUA, like we call it for short, each one of them have to go through pretty extensive clinical trials before they can even get an emergency use authorization. So it is definitely not rushed. The 2 clinical trials for the 2 vaccines that are currently got an EUA had over 70,000 people in their clinical trials before the FDA even reviewed any of that data. So that's why right now there's only 2, and they're working on more, but the FDA does have to take their time and review all of the data that's going to come out from the new vaccines before it'll even think about giving them an emergency use authorization. So for the 2 that we have right now, they're very similar. They're both mRNA vaccines. Both of them require 2 doses. The Pfizer one, you have to get your dose 3 weeks. Their second dose, you get 3 weeks later. The Moderna vaccine, the second dose, you get 4 weeks later. But other than that, they're extremely similar. The other vaccines coming down the line might be a little bit different. They might only be 1-dose vaccines. But again, the FDA is still reviewing the data because they do take their time. They do not rush those emergency authorizations.
Can one take the vaccine if they have an underlying condition? I see coming in, even someone, Diane and Dr. Sutton, talked about if they have 3 or 4 underlying conditions. So can you speak to that?
I'm going to refer that to the doctor.
Okay.
So I kind of alluded to this fact earlier. I think it's very important for everyone to do a risk-benefit analysis and determine whether or not, they're at increased risk of, one, getting infected with the virus, two, having serious complications from the virus, and three, whether or not they're at increased risk from having any type of complications from the vaccine itself. And so you have to utilize the resources that are available to you, and that includes your healthcare provider. So kind of speaking with your healthcare provider and doing a risk-benefit analysis and determining whether or not you are at increased risk and whether or not you should get that vaccine is going to be very important. I will say that as far as what we know and what the information has showed us, the vaccine itself is, I kind of explained how it works, and so there's no studies that show that it should worsen any medical conditions. It works to have your body to mount an immune response against the virus itself. In fact, if you have multiple medical conditions, then you are probably at more increased risk of having more serious complications from the virus, and such you should probably get the vaccine in order to decrease your chances of having a serious complication from the virus if you are infected.
How does that relate to allergies? What you just said, does that include allergic reaction? Can you get more specific on that?
Yeah, and so, it kind of depends on the vaccine and the ingredients of the vaccine, and each vaccine has different ingredients. And so knowing if you've had similar reactions to other vaccines, say you had an adverse reaction to the flu vaccine, then you just want to make your healthcare provider know that so that you can kind of do a risk-benefit analysis and determine whether or not you are at increased risk of having an allergic reaction to the COVID vaccine. There's not a lot of ingredients that go into, the actual vaccine, and the risk of anaphylaxis and allergic reaction is very, very little. We've already kind of reviewed some of the risk of just adverse reactions of the vaccine itself. Those are common reactions, and those are, in fact, reactions that we want to show that our immune system is working. So the fact that we get a fever or body aches or headaches, that's just saying that your little guys are in there working, doing their job so that you don't get sick. You have to think about it how it is. We have this army of cells and immune cells that work to fight off against foreign invaders. They're like the little soldiers, and so that's their job, and that's what God has given us, and we gotta use what we have in order to fight this thing, the information, the knowledge in our natural bodies to fight this thing. And so I think it is very important to kind of note, that if you are having adverse reactions, it's a sign that your immune system is working, and they are very short-lived. At the most, I think people are having adverse reactions for about 48 hours, if so.
So the fight is going on like in the cartoon, like the little fight is going on in there.
That's what I teach my kids.
It's so interesting.
You want the fight. I tell you that when I got the first vaccine, I did. I was so fatigued. I was so tired. I was so worn out. And one of the physicians had warned me, said, Diane, the second one, you're going to feel worse. Well, the second one, I felt good. And I went, boy, are you working? Because I feel good. But as she was saying about the reaction or allergy, once you get the vaccine, you stay with us. Nurses are watching you for 15 minutes afterwards. Because most likely, if you're going to have a reaction, it's going to be within that first 15 minutes.
Right. I'm glad you said that, because that was going to be my follow-up on that. How much time after you leave from that 15 minutes, you're going to pretty much know something before you leave then.
You're sure, but something can occur later on. And if it does,
How do you, right. What do you do if something occurs later on? How do you report that? That's just a basic.
So yeah, if it's a serious reaction, then you want to make sure that you go to the emergency room to be evaluated. If it's minor reactions, such as some of the ones that we've mentioned already, you can reach out to your healthcare provider to say, hey, I just had the vaccine, I'm feeling like this, and they can give you some instruction on how you can kind of deal with some of the symptoms that you're dealing with. Right now, it's okay, for you to take over-the-counter medication to kind of deal with some of the adverse reactions that you may get from the vaccine. So Tylenol and things like that can kind of help with muscle aches and the headaches that you may get. And that'll kind of get you through the first couple of hours or days with those reactions that are pretty minor when you consider the effects of COVID-19 itself.
So you all mentioned that if you have underlying conditions, COVID-19 doesn't put you at any greater risk of worsening those conditions because it's designed, not COVID-19, the vaccine, because it's designed to do a specific thing. We haven't talked, and some people asking questions about whether or not it's safe for pregnant women to take the vaccine and whether it puts the fetus or unborn child at risk. I'm asking that question.
You asked that question.
Forrest.
So
Go
right
ahead.
now, yeah, vaccine trials are designed in that they don't include pregnant people, and for good reason, because they're carrying a life, and so we don't test things on pregnant people.
You
And so
can't
we-
practice on an unborn baby.
Exactly. They don't have
Yeah,
the
kinda never
capacity
thought
to make
about it
their
that
own
way.
decisions. But, you know, just thinking, and so we don't have a lot of information. And I want to be straight up and say, you know, we don't have a lot of information on
Right.
the effects of the vaccine itself on pregnant people. But in theory, how the vaccine works, it does seem to be low risk for pregnant people right now. There hasn't been really a lot of clear recommendations on providing it to pregnant people. But in theory, you would think that if mom is vaccinated and she's able to create an antibody response, then those antibodies we know from natural immunity are able to be passed on to the fetus, so that maybe even the fetus itself could have some type of a immune response against the virus. And so, you know, that's just going off of prior information and information that we know. Right now, the trials are still going on. We're still getting a lot of information. And I think it's important for people, the general public, to understand that this is a year-long disease. This is a novel virus, it's new. And so science is using what we know from the past and the information that we have in order to quickly grow vaccines and treatment methods in order to kind of deal with this thing. And so right now we're still the trials are still going on, and they still have they're going to be monitoring the people who are involved in those trials in order to determine more safety evidence and more effective evidence. But right now we have the information to go off of and know that it is pretty safe and it is highly effective. And it will decrease your chances of having or contracting COVID-19 in addition to having a serious effect from the virus.
Dr. Studden, I want to stay with you on that before we get off of that, because you're on that pregnancy. The possibility, if it's a myth or what have we, of one being sterile after having taken the COVID-19 vaccination, can they become sterile?
So there is no evidence out that how the virus, how the vaccine works itself. There's no evidence, there's no scientific or medical way to actually say that this virus or this vaccine can cause you to be sterile. Scientifically, the way the vaccine works, it causes your body to create immune cells or create antibodies. Antibodies do not attack your reproductive organs. And so with that information, I can safely say that I don't think that this vaccine will cause you to be sterile. But I think it's a good question, and I think that it's important for us to, and especially the general public, to have those questions and to ask those questions, because it shows that you are engaged, that you are trying to make sure that you're informed and that you're going to make a well-informed decision about your health. But I will have to say that I do not agree with that. As far as all the studies go, there's no evidence that that is true.
Okay.
So I was just going to ask you, a great job with the safety research questions.
You got me in there. I stayed. Let me know when you come out.
Before we can
There's
get
some
to
good stuff, though.
before we get to questions pertaining to our listening audience, stay tuned. We can see your questions coming in. We're going to get to you shortly. Can we treat some of those trust, mistrust questions, because then we can talk a little bit about what we're doing locally to try and overcome some of these obstacles.
Okay. One of the things, trust and mistrust, I was looking at that. I'm glad you came to that. I was going to go to you with this, Jennifer, that the whole idea of will the vaccine ever go away? I mean, will the pandemic ever go away? Some people are saying that it's never going to go away. The flu has never gone away. It's just me being a person sitting here. I just know the flu has never gone away, but I don't know if that's a good precedent to hang with this?
Actually, it is a good precedent. I think that is a good. If you think about coronavirus is a big family of viruses. So COVID is part of a very large family of viruses which circulate every year. So if you've had the common cold, which probably everyone has a common cold every once in a while, you might have had a coronavirus in your past. Unfortunately, this one just managed to mutate to make people very, very sick. So like Dr. Sutton-Smith mentioned, this is very new. We haven't really seen this virus for more than a year, so we don't quite know the trajectory of the pandemic yet. However, it is reasonable to think that with mitigation measures, masking, social distancing, and the vaccine, we will be able to reduce the transmission and get back to a little bit more normalcy. Will it ever completely go away? Will it be seasonal like the flu and we have to get the flu shot every year? Will we have to get a COVID shot every year? Honestly, we don't have enough information to make that projection quite yet. So I think it's good that people understand that there's viruses that come around every single winter, and that could be what we need to prepare for. But the more people we get vaccinated and the more quickly they're vaccinated, the less likely the virus will continue to transmit in our community, and the faster it'll go away.
Mm-hmm. Given this is broad, anybody can take it. Got an idea under mistrust, specifically to relate to Lee County, the history of racism, medical racism, the disparity, the gap between blacks and whites. Is there anything the health department, the medical profession, everybody is doing to make sure that it's an equitable distribution of the vaccine? Wide open, go anybody.
I'm happy to start. Yes, we absolutely acknowledge the disparity here is very large. I tell people I'm from Baltimore, and when I moved here, I was shocked because I wasn't used to seeing such a disparity. I, lived in a community that was predominantly black, and when I moved here, I was confused about where all the black people were because it was just so disparate. There was just the separation is quite large, and I think, from a health department perspective, we need to do everything we can to meet people where they are and overcome that disparity. That is the mission and goal of public health. Mm-hmm. And so some of the things we're trying to do our best is, situations like this where we're trying to promote education and knowledge with the community leaders that we know can reach their community, but also, trying to meet people where they are. So we are working very closely with the churches and Mount Hermon Ministry to try to set up a vaccination site here, so that way in the future, people won't have to worry about getting an appointment at the site or booking something online. We're hopeful that very soon we'll be able to get vaccines right here in the heart of the community so that people can come to their home community and be vaccinated here.
Mm-hmm. She mentioned Mount Hermon. They're working closely with Mount Hermon. When she, Pastor, I know you're going to get into this, but I want to ask this. When she said they're working closely with Mount Hermon, I know you have connections to a lot of the other churches in the community. So that spins out like octopus legs, right?
Well, yeah. It is true that because of the location of our campus, access to major roads, our ability for parking and to stage testing, that we were approached at being a potential site for site-based community vaccinations. And we've gone through the process to get approved for that. And I was tasked with coordinating a registration effort with community pastors. In this first effort, I engaged 12 community pastors, 2 of whom are around the table here, to begin a list of 65 and plus individuals who want to take the vaccination, and when informed, will report to the test site. So I can say that we have upwards to 500 individuals waiting to get word, report to this site, and those individuals will receive the vaccinations.
Great news.
So I do applaud the health department in recognizing that gap, the disparity, and taking some concrete measures to address it. And I also want to commend our community pastors who have responded in such a way that they've created demand that outpace the vaccinations at this point. But this is, as I understand it, is based on a statewide program that's been implemented in other counties, working through churches in underserved populations to establish community site-based vaccinations to help close that gap. And if we have success here, of course, everybody who gets a first dose will get a second dose. But we want the success to dictate that, say, hey, the faith community is a reliable partner. If you provide the vaccinations, we can turn out the people to receive it, and we can have subsequent dates that we will announce to our community. So there's a very strong collaboration going on right now.
Diane, that laser focus that Jennifer has spoken of, Pastor Glover has spoken of, that laser focus right here in this community. You've been laserly focused here for, a long period of time. So that model has proven to be extremely successful. Speak to that from the medical profession angle,
Healthcare.
bringing it to people, right? Healthcare angle.
I have to admit, and there is some concern that all the vaccinations being done, and very minimal, as Pastor says, is coming that the brown and the African Americans getting vaccinated. So there's a major concern. How do we do that? How do we get this to them? And we want that to happen, because when you look in the hospital, you look at the patient load, you look at who's been admitted, you look at who's been affected, it is the black and the brown. And so I commend all of you, the pastor, and my pastor, my pastor, so much for taking that extra step to see that our people are vaccinated. I can't say enough about it.
Dr. Sutton?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I definitely 100% agree. I think we spoke about the disparity and the difference in the African American people who are actually getting the vaccine. And of the some 20 million people who have been vaccinated to date, only about 5% of people are of the black and brown community. And so it's very important. And I think that part of the disparity is due to access. And the other part is due to some of the hesitance that African American people have with trusting the medical system, with trusting the safety of the vaccine and the effectiveness of the vaccine, and whether or not they should get it. And so I think the purpose of this type of forum is to provide them with the education and the resources that they need, so that they do feel like they are educated and they can make a well-informed decision about their health, so that the hesitancy component, at least we can address that. The other component is the access component, and I think that, the health department, Jennifer kind of alluded to some of the things that the health department is trying to do in order to kind of make sure that we have access to the vaccine, and that we are able to vaccinate those who are higher risk. And unfortunately, our African American and minority communities are at higher risk for contracting the virus. We've seen that. This virus disproportionately affects people of color, and that's multifactorial, but part of the reason is for comorbid conditions that we kind of talked about earlier, the fact that we do have more diabetes and high blood pressure and lung disease and things like that. And part of the reason, like I said, is access to health, medical care, access to insurance, access to knowing where they can go to get medical care and to get the vaccine. And so I think, we have to kind of approach this from a multifactorial standpoint in order to bridge that gap and to kind of eliminate the disparities that exist.
And then one of the things that I want my community to think about, that we're trying to build up your antibiotics. You can get it through a vaccine, which is safe, or you can build up some antibiotics through getting COVID-19, and where there's a possibility that you could be seriously ill and you may die. Mm-hmm. And that's the decision I had to look at and say, wait a minute, I can get my antibiotics through getting the COVID-19, or I can build up some antibiotics by taking the vaccine, which is safe.
there's no studies that show death as an adverse effect from the vaccine. But we know, we have lived through this pandemic, and we know the effects of it. We have seen family members die, and church members die, and neighbors die. And so, it's different when we think about, the other vaccines that we had, say polio. A lot of us haven't lived through polio. We didn't see how detrimental that disease was, and so we didn't understand why we have to get that vaccine. But we have lived through this. We have seen the effects on it. Not only that, we know the impact that it has on our community. And so it's very important for us to try to mitigate that impact by getting the vaccine and also taking precautions to make sure that we keep ourselves safe. It's our job to not only protect ourselves, but to protect our friends and our loved ones and our neighbors and our colleagues, because we're in a global pandemic. We're in a state of emergency. And so I think we all have to do our part. We all have to recognize that we all play a really important role in eradicating or at least decreasing the transmission of this virus. And so we have to do our part. And that's why we're here. I think that's why we're all here, to do our part. To provide education and get the information out there so that people are informed and they can make a good decision.
Those questions are flying in. You see
Yes,
them
and
flying
I'm
in,
gonna-
right?
exactly.
You want to start hitting some?
Yes, but before we segue, and we are, right after this, because we talked about the collaboration between the health department and faith partners, which is going very well. There are questions about whether or not the elderly and handicapped will have transportation
Right.
to these test sites if they don't have transportation. And so a third part of the collaboration is, I don't know their official name, but
Lee-Tran?
Lee-Tran.
Right.
Okay,
Well,
so
Cody.
so they are around the table.
Cody, we shouting you out.
Yes, they are around the table and will be providing transportation once we're able to announce dates and times of that sort. So the elderly and the handicapped will have transportation to the sites.
So transportation is, as we know it, is being solved or is solved at this point using the county bus transit system.
Yep, and
Yes.
actually, the passport, or Lee-Tran, so the passport for all of our ADA community here, we've actually, anyone who's qualified 65 and older, we've already had Lee-Tran passport call down their list of people who are 65 and older to make them aware, and if they already had appointments at our airport site, they were brought out there, and we also brought them out to one of our health department locations a few weeks ago to vaccinate those individuals who are part of the passport program. So we've already tried to address a lot of those ADA transportation concerns in advance.
Give me an idea how that looks, though, safety-wise. Like there's a bus and there's some glass shields and everybody has on their mask and it's sanitized and a lot of people on there at one time. Just kind of, a quick overview.
Yeah, ever since the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of those transportation companies, especially Lee-Tran, have implemented all of that. What you mentioned, they've got the masking, they limit the number of people who can get on the bus, so that way they can be 6 feet apart. So that's really what happens, is that they have to make a few more trips because there's less people who can fit on the bus, but yes, they absolutely keep them distanced like that.
And they go to these people's houses and pick them up.
Correct.
All right, it's beautiful.
I just want to add something, not to what about the transportation, but we're encouraging people to take the vaccine. But I also want to say that once you take the vaccine, you still need to be careful. You still need to wear your mask. You still need to practice social distance. You still need to avoid crowds. You still need to use the ventilation, proper ventilation. So we don't get rid of that just because you took the vaccine. You continue to practice all things that has been implemented before the vaccine taken.
And I think that's a very important point, because the trials that we have thus far are evaluating the effectiveness of the vaccine. And there's not a whole bunch of data out on the transmissible, like whether or not you're able to transmit the virus after actually being vaccinated. And so that's why we do encourage you to make sure that you still take the necessary precautions of wearing your mask and practicing hand hygiene and social distancing and everything, just because we don't know. And in theory, we would think just how the immune system works and how our body works, that we're able to mount an immune response to it, and therefore we should have a lower viral load. And with a lower viral load, then we will probably not transmit it the virus as much, so it makes sense. However, we don't know, and we don't have that data. And so because of that, we want to make sure that we're taking all the necessary precautions, which is one, getting vaccine or getting the vaccination, and two, making sure that you do all of the measures that you guys probably addressed with your first symposium of protecting yourself.
Okay, go to this.
Yes, please.
Okay, fine. Okay,
Questions from
so
the audience?
I'm going to summarize this. Okay, we know Mount Hermon is located in the Dunbar community. Some people we keep saying Dunbar, but there are other people of color outside of Dunbar, Lehigh, East Fort Myers, and things of that nature. When we laser focus in this, we're not just talking about Dunbar. Can somebody kind of geographically?
Absolutely. The collaboration of churches who are involved, and I'm sure after the symposium that number will grow. Some pastors will reach out who I initially did not reach out to, and that is welcomed. But we have churches in Buckingham, East Fort Myers, North Fort Myers, Central Fort Myers. Okay, so this is for wherever underserved populations are, this becomes a community vaccination site, and those citizens are eligible for the vaccination if they're in the demographic that's being targeted, and they can get here on vaccination day.
How do we know that a bunch of white people are not going to be out there in lawn chairs in front of Mount Hermon taking all the vaccinations?
Quote unquote. That's that's the question you're reading. That's not the question from you.
Okay,
we just want to clarify. Well, I'm comfortable saying this, that the collaboration that we have been talking about was born out of that reality. That one of the early vaccination sites was the STARS complex in the heart of the community. And the numbers showed that 600 vaccinations were given that day, and only 50 went into the arms of black and brown. And again, it isn't the fault of the people who showed up for the vaccination, because they can't be turned away. It's the result of all the other contributing factors that I mentioned as well contributed to that. But the acknowledgement has been, we have to do something specific and targeted to close that gap. And so this is why community partners are being used. This is why community partners are making the list, the appointment list per se, so that once that information gets out, those are the individuals who will be receiving the vaccination. And we say that with the caveat that, and I say it because it was said to me, in no way, shape, or form can there be any form of discrimination in terms of turning people away. If they show up, they have to be vaccinated. This approach is just targeting an audience to make certain that we're likely to hit that demographic.
I see. Do we, I don't need to say
Jennifer,
this.
did I do okay with that?
Right.
You did a great job.
I don't need to.
All right.
Okay, so just to get right to it, do we know if any of the family physicians have access to vaccines, and are they offering vaccinations to their patients?
And so right now, currently, initially when the vaccines were rolled out, my practice, our office, we actually were afforded 250 vaccines, and we were able to get in contact with some of our high-risk patients, those patients that met the criteria for high risk, and get at least 250 of our patients vaccinated. Unfortunately, it has been a supply and demand thing, and so we haven't been able to get more inventory. So right now, we're kind of directing our patients to some of the community resources that are able to administer the vaccine. We're hoping, that we will get more vaccines in order to kind of administer them out to the community and to our patients. But right now, we're kind of directing them to the different resources within the community in order to make sure that they are able to have access to the vaccination itself.
Right.
And that's probably the same for lots of the practices within the community. Some of them may have been afforded some vaccines. We were, because we work within Lee Memorial, so we work within Lee Health, and that's a big healthcare healthcare system, and so we were able to get vaccines, and so some of the smaller practices may not be able to, and you have to also think about the ability to be able to store the vaccine and keep it safe and so that it remains effective. So you have to kind of take all of those things into consideration when you start talking about being able to administer the vaccine itself.
I'm going to tie two questions together and get to you, Jennifer, keep you involved in the discussion as the health department. Is there estimated, you knew this was going to come, Pastor Glover, you knew this was going to come as well. Is there an estimated time frame on those 65 people being able to start receiving the vaccine, this property here? And also, does a person income, wealth, how are you guys going about keeping people from getting privileged based on their income status or connections and things like that?
I'm happy to start. So with, so a lot of...
You can go with the first one first, the 65, estimated time.
For people younger than 65?
Well,
yes.
The whole thing about Mount Hermon is going to be right.
For the people
is
here.
there estimated time? Because we know we didn't say that. People
Yeah,
right now
so
ready to
our vaccine, we find out week to week what vaccine, how much we're going to
There
get,
you go.
and so usually we don't find out to the very end of the week, and so we may not have a lot of notice because we want to probably do something on a weekend, and we usually find out Friday how much vaccine we're going to get. But I would anticipate within within the next few weeks, we should be able to get at least a couple hundred people vaccinated here, the 65 and older who are qualified through that large church community that we've been talking about. So that is our goal. We just have to wait to find out how much vaccine we're going to get this week.
Right, and under that same guise, you can come in on that, Pastor Glover and the other pastor, but the whole impetus behind all this is that we don't want to have vaccines and nobody's available to take them. So we know people are ready. We know we got a list now. So it really is, it's a lot of optimism, right?
Well, yeah, and I think that is the good news. Okay, the good news is that the last 2 weeks, essentially, the clergy have been working to get a list together that we collectively can mobilize, and in a 48-hour notice, make a call and say, vaccinations will happen on this date, on this time frame. Are you going to be able to make it? Yes, then we expect them. So that work has been done. That's the good news. We're just kind of waiting on the call. and that's really what the health department needed. They needed partners who could essentially register people and turn them out. And so the churches, the pastors have worked well together, have been very responsive, and I have to say that all of them have been tremendous in their response. And so we're ready to go. And I know I have people listening who have not been reached. And what I want to say is that you have not been omitted. This is a trial run for us. And there was an intentional effort to try to keep it manageable in terms of expectations and turnout. And even with that, we've exceeded the number of people who are already saying, no, I want this virus. I want this vaccine. Now, for me, that's good news because it speaks counter to this idea that that the minority communities are fearful and don't want it. I think that's a myth we need to dispel. Everything we're learning as we've reached out into our congregations with this particular demographic, 65 and older, is that the vast, vast, vast majority, they want the security of the vaccination. And I'm hopeful that that will prove true as we work down to demographics. So that's the best answer we have for that.
I'm getting a lot, I know you're right seeing this, but we get a lot of questions about children getting the vaccination. Can they get it? What age they can get it? But we're really talking about, right now, we're talking about 65 and older. Do we want to just hit that right quick and move on because that's not where we are? Or can somebody give a broad medical thing on that?
So right now, the two vaccines that we have available, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine is approved for ages 16 and older. The Moderna vaccine is approved for ages 18 and older. So right now, currently, we are not administering the vaccine to pediatric populations just yet, just because we're still waiting to get more evidence and more guidance as to, the safety and effectiveness of the vaccine in that particular demographic of patients. So no pediatric populations are going to be receiving it. Right now, the initiative is to vaccinate those that are higher risk. So that's why we're addressing the 65 or older population, in addition to those who have chronic conditions. And then our healthcare workers, our frontline workers, all of those who are in constant contact with people, and put their lives at risk every day having to do their job, which we know that the majority of our frontline workers are minority population. And so they are at risk. And so that's why we're really trying to put forth an effort to make sure that that population is going to be reached with this vaccine.
After getting the COVID-19 vaccination, can one anticipate that we're going to have to get this annually, like a flu shot, a normal course of life? Is that going to be?
I mean, that's, kind of what I was alluding to earlier with how is the pandemic going to go. At this point, we've only been vaccinating people in the United States for a little over 2 months. So we really just don't have that information yet on how long the immunity is going to last and whether or not we will need a booster, or, if we're going to need to see what other of these variant strains we hear about, if we're going to need a booster for those. Honestly, the science is not there yet, so we'll have to see. But at that point, we are very hopeful that if that is something you have to get every year, it would be just like a flu shot, and you would go to your doctor or the pharmacy or the health department, wherever you normally go to get a flu shot. If that is the case, if we do need to get it annually, then hopefully it'll just be a normal routine thing, and we won't have to do this big, large outreach every single time. It'll just become part of your normal routine life, if that's where we get.
With all this talk about that. Oh, my bad. I forgot about that. I'm a TV guy. Okay, 1, 2, is on? Okay, sorry about that. With all the talk about the going to the website, registering, crashing, a lot of older African Americans and just older people in general don't even go on website, don't have laptops, don't have blah, blah, blah. What's the solution?
Well, I would like to make a plug.
Can you just do an old-fashioned register with a piece of paper and a pen?
So,
Something?
in addition to us trying to do some more targeted outreach to our communities, here locally, trying to make sure that people have access and not needing to worry about going out. If you are still looking for, a vaccine, we actually do. The state of Florida has rolled out a website where you can pre-register. And then that way, once the vaccine becomes available, like I said, each week we find out how much we're going to get in the county. When that happens, we just call down a list, first come, first serve. And so the website, which we can definitely share, so it's on everybody's, here, I'll share on your websites. It's myvaccine.fl.gov. So myvaccine.fl.gov. So that is a place for people to pre-register. So that way there's no worry about the website crashing or needing to call for an appointment. You pre-register, you get your spot in line basically, and then once vaccine comes available, we call down the list, first come, first serve. And hopefully that also addresses kind of your earlier question. You talked about making sure that, people aren't getting the vaccine because they know someone who knows someone, or they have a certain privilege to get into, with their medical provider or the health department. Literally, we just get a list and we call down the list. If we get 2,000 vaccines, we call the first 2,000 people on the list. Next week, we get another 2,000. We call the next 2,000. So that is the goal going forward, that people will pre-register and we will call them as soon as we get the vaccine.
Do we foresee where the whole idea of a limited amount of vaccines being available will be a thing of the past? It just be just plenty of vaccines available. It's just a matter of getting it to people. Is that going to come anytime soon?
I pray for that day every day. Yeah. So I know that the current the current new presidential administration, President Biden has put it out there that he's getting enough vaccine to vaccinate the entire United States population by the summer. So we're hoping that translates to more vaccine here. I will say here in Lee County, the number of vaccines we've been receiving in the county has remained pretty steady, but now we're diversifying it. So it's not all coming to the health department. Some of it's going to the Publix pharmacies. And that's great. You know, you should never have one game in town. You don't want a monopoly on anything. So the more vaccines come available, the more they will be spread to different medical providers. You asked about doctors having it at their offices. More of them will be able to get the vaccine. So once the supply increases, we will be able to diversify who has the vaccine and where you can get it. It won't just be Publix and it won't just be the health department. It'll be a lot of other avenues as well.
And right now we have two known vaccines that are being administered, but we also have different manufacturers that are currently going through the trial process with the FDA and trying to get emergency use authorization in order to be able to start administering their vaccines. So Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca is also trying to roll out their vaccine as well. And so, like she said, we don't want to monopolize anything. We want to make sure that we have enough vaccines to go around, and as long as they can meet the criteria to be safe and to be effective, then we want to try to start getting those vaccines out to the community as well.
Pastor Glover, anything you want to add, subtract, or you want to stay there? Because I know we haven't, the clergy right now is just kind of, they haven't been involved in this process.
Well, no, this is fine.
Okay, I don't want y'all to feel
the questions that have been asked are outside of our will well. Okay, so we're fine with having the questions answered and the people being educated. We're here, and we have, just to discuss our role in facilitating this process, and also hopefully to be trusted community voices. Dr. Phil, Dr. Anderson, serve in this community, and we want everyone to know that, they're not a bunch of quacks up here giving us advice. These are people who labor with you, who love you, who marry you, who bury you, who counsel you, who have your best interests at heart.
Okay.
So I think this is going extremely well.
Okay, so I'll continue then.
We don't mind.
Okay, I said, me being guy. Diane.
Look, this ain't our show.
Okay, so what I'm seeing here is somebody is saying, okay, let's get black healthcare. We got black health expert. How do you just health experts? I think you gave me the word for it. Well, we got black people on the panel who are medical experts. We want them to talk to it from a black perspective. How comfortable you feel about it, encouraging. They want to hear from,
And you know what this goes towards?
Huh?
You know what this question goes towards? This question goes towards trust. Mm-hmm. They're saying, we heard all of the medical explanations and you've broken it all down. What I really want to know, can we trust you? Can we trust what you're saying? That's exactly what that question goes towards.
And I think they want that whole sister girl, piece. Like, hey, talk to us regular, no science. You know us, we know you. Come on, tell us.
No science.
Right.
Let me tell you, it was a struggle with me too. So I'm saying to myself, do I take this vaccine because I'm obligated to my coworkers, my community, and people I'm dealing with all the time? Should I take this vaccine if I got to take this vaccine? Because at first I said I'm not going to take it. And I had to get some
That's great to hear that from you.
Yeah, I'm honest.
So it's fair for people to have that apprehension.
It's fair. It's fair. But what helped me getting the information, because I was going off of old stuff, and I take the flu vaccine, there may be a live virus, and I may have an allergy. But when I got the information and said, wait a minute, this is not a live virus. This is something that's going to make my body work. And protein is something we need. It's stimulating the protein to stimulate the antibiotic. I may be saying a little, but it's making my body recognize something that is entering my body that doesn't belong there, and it's going to fight it off. When I learned that, I went, I can't wait to get the vaccine.
So may I?
Go ahead.
So hearing you, it was the education that caused you to take the vaccine.
It was an education that caused me to take the vaccine.
So with that being said, I think that there are a lot of people tonight. This symposium will really help because to hear that from you and to hear the doctor and to hear the young lady from
Jennifer from the health department.
From the health department, that is education.
Mm-hmm.
And the more educated our people become, I think the more they will reach out and say, look, I'm gonna take this.
So to build on that, because this really comes down to, and one of the reasons why it was important to have this symposium, and I want to thank everyone for responding so quickly, because the idea of the symposium came about after we were approached with the collaboration for the community vaccination site. And my thought was it would be great to have something to educate leading into that. And it all stems from the need, to educate. So the question is, beyond tonight, where can people go to get reliable information? We know how easy it is to access toxic information, information designed to promote, conspiracy theories, and some of the stuff we talked about earlier. But where can people go to get good information that's understandable, that's relatable? Is there somewhere we can direct people for that?
Absolutely. I mean, of course, we always make a plug for the CDC. They're the ultimate, authority when it comes to these things. I know that their website is very large, and sometimes people are like, I can't find what I'm looking for because there's almost too much information on that website sometimes. But, at the health department, we have tried to break it down a little bit. So floridahealth.gov is our health department website. We have some information on there that makes it a little bit easier to understand. And then I always like to make a plug. Being from Baltimore, I used to work at Johns Hopkins University, and they have a really excellent website as well with FAQs. So if you're interested from a more academic perspective, if we talk about knowledge, I also just going to make a plug there for Johns Hopkins University, and their website also has some great information on there as well.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Sutton, like all these 24-hour news thing, it's coming this information is coming at us from people sitting up there with white jackets on, experts. To me, and I'm not to seem a little disconnected from regular, people, but it just seems like a lot of information is just out there. It's not hard to get information, is it? Is that yes or no?
There is a lot of information out there, but I think it's important to point out that there's different types of information. And so you want to make sure that you're getting accurate, evidence-based information. And that's why you want to go to those reliable sources. So I think the question that was just asked and posed was a very important question. You want to make sure that you point people in the right direction to be able to have access to accurate information so that we can decrease the transmission of myths within the minority community. And so going to like the CDC website, going to the World Health Organization's website, going to some of the academic websites to get that information, and also utilizing your healthcare professionals is very important. And if you don't have a healthcare professional that you feel like you can utilize, then you need to find another healthcare professional. So you need to be able to go to your doctor, go to your physician, ask these questions, present these questions, and be able to get the information that you need so that you can make an informed decision about your health. And so utilizing all the resources that are available to you, I think, is very important, especially your doctors, your healthcare providers. And there's different avenues available for you to kind of contact them. Now with the pandemic, you can make telemedicine appointments. You can reach out through the different patient portal systems, through MyChart to ask questions. You can make appointments to ask questions. But the bottom line is, if you want information, there's information out there. You just have to make sure that you go and get the accurate information.
I know before we Tuskegee, Pastor Glover mentioned Tuskegee at the beginning. People keep throwing it out. Seeing it here, Tuskegee, 1937. That experiment, about 600 black men with the syphilis injected into different forms and fashion. Okay, so when I first started, that's the go-to for the black community, the Tuskegee. But it's totally different right now. That was secretive, if I'm not mistaken. This is open to any public. That was only on black people, white people taking this vaccine. Just a whole lot. The science is different. Can you kind of let's get rid of Tuskegee as an example?
Let's put it out there. The history is history, and we have to learn from our history. So it's important to kind of rely on some of the stuff that has happened in our past. And so Tuskegee did happen, and I think that the Tuskegee experiment, in addition to some of the other things that happened in history with experimentation on African American women to advance the OBGYN knowledge, and there's a lot of things that happen within our history, within the medical system, that has created the mistrust that the African American community has within the medical system. However, like you have kind of already alluded to, times are different. You know, we have information disposable to us. Like, we can get the information that we need. With this particular vaccine and with these particular trials, these trials were tested on all different races, on a lot of different ages, on people who have comorbid conditions, so that you can have adequate information to go off of to determine whether or not they're safe and whether or not they're effective. And so we are living in a different time, and these are different times. You can't secretly do trials and experiments on folks anymore. People are too smart for that. So it's not going to happen. And we have information available to us. We can get on the internet. We can look up stuff. We can ask questions.
And we have a lot of black scientists and doctors out there
exactly.
like you talking about it.
Who care and who want to, who want to make sure that you're educated and who want to make sure that you're well informed. And so I think that, going to those people and asking the right questions and getting the information or participating in forums like this is very important, so that you can be well informed and know that this is a different time. Your mistrust and how you feel is appropriate. However, you have to kind of look at the situation at a whole and know that these are different times, and we have taken appropriate measures to make sure that it is safe and it is effective.
How do we deal with people who have religious beliefs in general, not related to COVID-19, just in general, that they don't take medicine? They don't do that.
Could we have a clergy take a shot at that, Dr. Phil?
Yeah.
It seems like it requires your wisdom on this one.
Well, I don't subscribe to that. I think, like Dr. Glover said earlier, God is a God of knowledge, and God uses science to advance his purpose and his will. I believe divine healing is both instantaneous and progressive through medicine. And so I think that's pure ignorance from a theological standpoint. I respect the person's conviction, but to say because of a religious belief I'm going to take medicine, I think is an insult to God, to be honest with you, because Jesus talked about the whole idea of physicians and everything else. So he had a physician as part of his disciple corps. So if he was anti-physicians, he would not have had Dr. Luke, as part of his traveling posse. So I would say to people who hold those beliefs, please sit under good, sound, biblical teaching and not some far-fetched person who's giving you things that are not nestled in God's word.
And Jesus actually made it very clear what his positions. And then we're at our time. We want to be respectful, so we got to wrap it up. But Jesus actually made it very clear what his positions were on physicians and medicine. Jesus actually said, and I believe the Gospel of Luke, he that is sick needeth a physician. He that is not does not. So right there, Jesus is saying, if you're sick and you got access to a doctor, go to the doctor. You could very easily pray and go to the doctor. Pray for the doctor, as opposed to not going and only praying. So that's this ultra hyper sense of being religious and spiritual. And so I agree with Dr. Phil in that sense. That's not healthy religion. That's toxic religion. Dr. Anderson, you want to weigh in on that?
No,
I'm
good.
Okay.
Good. Okay.
Then Lee, let's segue out of the questions. Thank everyone, and go into our closing comments.
Okay. So, segueing out of the questions, I want to say that this has just been amazingly education. If anybody who watched this and didn't get any education out of this, I don't know what we could have done better. Congratulations to everybody who participated in this panel discussion. Big shout out to Mount Hermon Ministries, still leading the way and getting information out and being at the forefront of these types of key issues in our community. Let's go straight to closing remarks, and we'll take about a minute from each person to close it out. Let's start with right here with Dr. Anderson.
Well, Dr. Glover, thank you again for allowing me to be a part of this symposium. This was awesome. I must say it was eye-opening. It was educational. And I trust that the persons who watch this symposium would take the education and do like Ms. Spears did. She was educated, and she went and got her vaccine. And so we want to thank all of the panelists for being here, the doctor. Matter of fact, there are some who I don't think they give clergy the kind of respect that they need. For instance, Dr. Glover been doing these symposiums for a minute. Okay, for someone to tell him, make sure you have a medical professional. He's not a medical professional. He's a doctor, but he's not a medical doctor. Matter of fact, I had a member who said she went to the doctor, and I had just received my doctoral degree. Went to the house. She says, I need you to tell me what this said because you're a doctor. I said, look, I am not a medical doctor. You need to talk to your medical doctor. And also want to thank First Lady Cheryl for standing by her husband while the symposium go on.
Thank you, sir. Diane.
First of all, thank you for inviting me. And I hope that we answered your questions about COVID-19 and the vaccine to take. I hope we gave you enough information that you will make your decision as to whether you're going to take the vaccine or not out of facts and not fear, and allow your faith to help you make that decision. Okay.
I'll go last.
First of all, let me thank Dr. Glover and First Lady Cheryl for being first-class leaders, of always being the pioneers in our community of making sure that our community is served. And I want to thank the doctors and Jennifer from the health department for making themselves available and the gift of their time. And Diane, thank you so much. I just want to say to everyone who's watching and listening, people always say information is power. I don't believe that. I believe what you do with the information is powerful. Because if information is power, we have a lot of powerful people out there. So information by itself is not power. It's what you decide to do with that information. And tonight, we've been exposed to power, and now we have to activate that power. And for me, one of the great takeaways was hearing that this vaccine was not rushed. This vaccine was something that was already in the works, and COVID-19 accelerated the urgency to advance the science. So for me, that was very reassuring, so thank you for that. And so I want to say to everyone who's watching tonight or listening, please get the information and put yourself in a position to live the number of years that God designed for you to live before Corona stepped in.
Amen.
Yes, thank you so much. I really do appreciate the invitation here, and I really appreciate especially the clergy welcoming us so much. Sometimes it's the health department perspective, you know, we like to joke, we say, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. And people don't always want that help, and trust me, I've worked now in local government for over 8 years, and I understand the mistrust and the hesitancy of the community. And so that's why I'm so appreciative that you've invited us. That's why we made every effort. We want to be a part of this community. We want to be a part of this conversation. And, you know, it's been a long year. We've had COVID here in Lee County almost a year. March 6th was the first case that we reported. So we're almost a year in now. It's been a long year. We've worked a lot of long days, and we've unfortunately seen hundreds of people within our community lost to this virus. So we at the health department absolutely want to be here for you, and we are happy, you know, we want to hear these suggestions on how we can best get this vaccine to the community who needs it. So thank you very much for having me.
And I just want to kind of echo everything that has already been said. Thank each and every one of you guys for allowing me to be here and to provide any insight that I can from a medical perspective on the effectiveness and safety of the vaccine itself. Thank you, Dr. Glover, and First Lady Cheryl, for allowing us to be here. Thank you, Diane, so much for offering the opportunity. It is my pleasure to be here and to kind of be involved with representing the medical community, because representation matters, especially in the setting of the minority population. And so I hope that this encourages other healthcare professionals to get more involved with the community and educating the community so that we can make sure that people are well informed and they can make well informed decisions about their health. So thank you again. And if you have more questions, definitely utilize some of those resources that we've provided for you, or just reach out to your healthcare provider so that you can do a risk-benefit analysis and determine your risk and whether or not you want to move forward with getting the vaccine. So I actually am in training. I'm a resident physician, and so I'm completing my residency training at family medicine. I do have my own patient panel, and so I work right over at Lee Memorial. We are on the 7th floor, and I am taking new patients, and so you guys always taking new patients.
She's growing her practice.
I am, yes. I graduated from medical school in 2019, and a lot of people don't know the whole path of medical school and kind of getting a doctorate, but after medical school, you have to do residency in whatever specialty you want to go into. And so right now, thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I'm just grateful to be here and grateful to learn and learn from other people and other people's wisdom. And I'm just grateful to continue to be a sponge and soak up as much information so that I can be of use to my patients in the future. So right now, like I said, our office is the FSU GME Clinic on the 7th floor, Suite 709. My name is Dr. Smith Sutton. We have about 24 residents that work in our office. We serve an underserved population. We treat people who don't have health insurance, who have little insurance, who don't have income. And so we accept everyone. And hopefully I can kind of provide my card and my information to you guys so that you can, if you need a healthcare provider, you want to work with culturally competent physicians, and that's what we really try to focus on with our residency program, is highlighting the differences in cultures and how you have to treat each patient differently. Because
Can you just say a phone number right now?
239-343-3831 is our office number, or you can just kind of look us up, but that's our office number. And like I said, I'll definitely leave my contact information for anyone who wants to kind of get established with our
You
practice.
just did to people listening, and they'll watch this, and plus I'll be interviewing you after this, so we'll get that to them.
And so before I close and have Dr. Anderson close in prayer, I don't know, Lee, this is your 6th, 7th symposium with us. As moderator, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make?
No.
That's a first. Saving it for your show.
I just want to say, Pastor, I just really enjoyed this, and I want to say any morsel of time left to just soak up your closing is always interesting. I'm just going to pierce down at the great orator.
Well, a good preacher knows that when you've had others who've gone before you have said all that really needs to be said, you do well not to add too much to that. And I think everyone on the panel have expressed my sentiments in regards to this evening. So I just want to echo the thank yous to my brothers in the cloth, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Phil, for always standing at the ready to respond to the call to participate in these symposiums. So thank you both so very, very much. You have so much influence and add so much value to the care of our community. So I appreciate you both so very much. And also to our healthcare professionals here, our very own Diane Spears. Thank you so very much for always being willing to share the wealth of your knowledge. And 2 new friends I've made tonight and through this panel. Jennifer, thank you so very much, representing the Department of Health, and Dr. Smith Sutton. Welcome to our community. Thank you so very much. And I'd be remiss if I also did not acknowledge First Lady Cheryl Glover, our business administrator here at Mount Hermon Ministries, who, you know, I'm a crazy person when I get caught up in trying to do the work of the ministry, and she knows when to give me space and wait for me to return to my normal self. So I know I've been crazy the past week, so thank you for your patience. And then all the behind the scenes people, our office administrator, Jessica Addison, thank you so very much. And our media folks who are working tonight, Keith, Michael, and Nehemiah. God bless y'all so very much for making this happen as we continue to serve the community. And to all of those who are listening, please heed the advice that's been given, Dr. Phil's advice. Knowledge has been provided. It's what you do with it that empowers you, that makes you a powerful person. Take that with you. Do something with this knowledge. If you're going to build on it, go to reliable sources. I love the times that we live in and how easy it is to access information. But if it's bad information you're accessing, it's going to hurt your life. So make certain that the sources are good, that they're grounded in facts and truth and reality. And take that information and make the right decision for yourself, your family, and your community. So thank you all for joining us tonight. We're going to have Dr. Anderson close us in prayer.
Let us pray. Most gracious God, our Father, we thank you for allowing us another opportunity to gather for a virtual clergy symposium. Our gathering here tonight has been one that was very much needed as we have witnessed this coronavirus pandemic taking havoc and creating havoc within the world, where many of our loved ones have passed away. There are many who have lost their jobs. Families have been divided. But we thank you for being the God that you promised us you would be. You promised that you would meet us at the point of need. And so we thank you for every person that has been speaking tonight. We pray that you would replenish what has been depleted from them. We pray that you would bless them on their jobs. We pray for these pastors, that you would keep them safe. We even pray for Lee Pitts, that you would keep his voice whole. We pray that you would bless our congregations, bless our communities. We pray that you would bind us together, for we know together we stand, and divided we will fall. And we do know that, as has been said, knowledge in and of itself is not powerful. It's what you do with it. So, God, we pray that the information that has been given here tonight, just as you've said in your word, be doers of the word and not hearers only. Help us to take what we've learned here tonight and put it to use, that this coronavirus, this pandemic that has taken havoc in our community, will one day cease. We give you praise in advance for what you're going to do. We thank you for what you've already done. And so, God, we speak tonight as never before. Thy will be done. In Jesus' precious name we do pray. Amen.
Amen.